Hello.
Hello,
Oh,
we can hear you.
excellent. And I suppose it's time to do the usual thing of trying to find a note taker before we get started. Anybody feel like volunteering? Probably should have asked on the list, though that often doesn't work either.
I did post to the list.
Oh, okay.
So far, crickets.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if a few people turn up who we can possibly um, strong arm.
So why don't we get started and then we'll have that awkward moment where we ask for note takers and hound people. But
Sounds good or something, yes. All right. Okay, so this is the AVTCORE working group of the IETF virtual interim. Hopefully, we can get some good progress today. You're driving the slides, right, Bernard? Yes, you are. Good. Okay, remote meeting tips. Um, so raise your hand, which is at the bottom of the screen, to enter the queue. Um, if you want to speak, when it's your turn to talk, you need to enable your audio, which is the microphone icon. You can also enable video if you want, but it's separate from audio, so you have to turn them on separately. Video is encouraged but not required. Please keep audio and video off if you're chairing unless you're chairing or presenting or commenting. And use of a headset is strongly recommended. Mine, unfortunately, his battery's dead. Um, um, to avoid echo. No, actually, the echo cancellation has gotten somewhat better, but better safe than sorry. Note well, by participating in the IETF, you are agreeing to comply by the IETF's various policies, including patents and code of conduct. I think we have a few more specific details on a few of those in future slides, but you should be aware of all of them. Um, the links are below. There should be actual links in the slide deck. Participant obligations. If you're starting a presentation, you must say if there's IPR with your draft. When asking questions or commenting, you must disclose any IPR your employer controls related to the draft, and there is a document describing potential consequences of violating those policies. Also, um, the IETF is covered by the Code of Conduct and Anti-Harassment policies. If you have any concerns about anyone's behavior, please talk to the Ombuds team, um, and please treat everybody with respect and dignity and If you're disagreeing, argue with ideas, not people. Okay, about this meeting. The meeting info, the data tracker, note taker, we still need. I will keep an eye on the chat, but we need somebody to take notes, please. So now is the time when, as mentioned, we have the awkward silence while we wait for somebody to volunteer to take notes. And Spencer.
Yeah, I can take notes, and I, as usual, beg other people to watch what I type.
Yeah.
For one thing, I'm paying close attention to the the RTP over quick draft, which is number 5, and I'm presenting number 6. So if I was not trying to take notes by myself for those two things, that would be great. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So if we could have a backup note taker, especially even if you're presenting in one of the other sessions, especially covering, backing up Spencer and covering for him when he's presenting would be excellent. Anybody maybe want to, Magnus?
I can do that.
Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So draft status, we've got a number of drafts published. We've got a number of drafts in the queue, all in edit state. So that's exciting. I think EVC may even be beyond that now. I think it's in auth 48. I've certainly seen a lot of the comments going back and forth with the authors. We've adopted a number of drafts. Stefan, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually past auth 48. It's now the publication.
Cool, excellent. That's very exciting. All right, so we have adopted a number of drafts listed here. I think some of those we're talking about today, and let's see. And then the GitHub setup. We created the organization, but we haven't put anything in it yet. So we will try to set that up. I think that's probably on me. So note takers, please make sure that's an action item on me to.
Is there anything special people need to do these transfers?
Pierre Anthony just sent me email with links for what I need to how I need to create the repo. So I think I basically have to I have to create it and then give whoever is the author. Pierre, you seem to have done it, looked at the infrastructure. Do you want to talk about what I need to do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just as you were about to say, I think the simplest is if you could create the repos and give the editor maintain permission, and then I can take it from there.
Sounds great. I will do that for
Thanks.
Any editors who want to port into that. Magnus?
Yeah, but us who already have I guess we can transfer them too. So
yeah, you should be able to. I mean, whether you want to port in or transfer, I think it's yeah. I mean, obviously,
transferring the prop. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the problem. I mean, the only downside with transfer was, of course, you lose. I mean, wherever you were, you lose it entirely. But also, then you have to change the name unless you happen to pick the exact name that we plan to use on IETF WG AVTCORE. So
yeah,
that's why. I mean, and whatever, really.
Yeah, I mean, certainly anything that has significant issues and PRs against it, we probably want to transfer rather than port, so we keep that history. But I will see what I can figure out. I would assume you could rename it at the same time you transfer it, though. I understand.
No.
No.
But it's an easy step, but it's a secondary step.
I mean, I can do it one and then the other. For the first and then the second should be pretty, hopefully, straightforward. If it's 2 clicks rather than 1, that's not a big deal. Lucas?
Right.
Yeah, so I have a question. The V3C one should be on this list or not?
That'd be a 3C. You mean
The RTP for the V3C, which we have today.
Well, we're just doing the ones that have been adopted for now.
Okay.
So we'll try to make these work, and that one, once it gets adopted, we can worry about it. But
yeah, I mean, I think we said that we were willing to let not yet adopted drafts, which seem likely to be adopted, be in the repo also. So,
what does it mean, adopted?
Adopted
sorry for
means the working group has officially agreed that this is a topic we will work on, and it gets published as a draft IETF AVTCORE.
So V3C already passed this last
Oh,
call.
it's past the work. Maybe we just forgot this on this list then. All right.
And we have our own GitHub for
Okay,
the
yeah, so we can
draft.
certainly-
Should we transfer it here or?
It's probably a good idea. Yes, it's a good idea to have them all in the IETF organization if they're official working group documents. So
Yeah.
yeah, we will. All right. Spencer?
Yeah, and this is actually for the notes also. So we're using this for recently adopted drafts, of which we have several, and authors who wish to do so can use the AVTCORE organization also for drafts that they hope will be adopted.
Yeah, I think we've decided that's fine.
Okay, cool. And that this actually, the last bullet on this slide was actually a question I had, whether drafts that have not been adopted yet could be included in the activity this week script. But it sounds like if they're in the repo, that would be an even better idea.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think so. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, so here's our agenda. First, a presentation from Magnus about closing this registry, J2K, V3C, RTP over quick, SDP for RTP over quick, haptics, and then viewport and region of interest. And finally, next steps. Pierre, do you have something to say, or do you just leave your audio on?
Oh, I had muted on my side.
Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. So if nobody has any comments about the agenda, we can get started. I guess first up is Magnus.
Yeah, I created a few slides. There's not a lot to talk about, but basically give people the background. I think everyone knows generally why this draft exists.
Magnus is here. Did you want to talk to him?
Oh,
Magnus?
okay.
Yeah, thank you for creating the slides, but they're basically what I is. So yeah. So this is, I mean, what's needed here is basically, or what we talked about before, is to close this payload-specific registry, clean up the missing registry so that all up to this point where we approve this, get this approved, is basically listed. And I guess now, I don't know how well what is happening with those that are in the publication queue. Maybe you shares have a better, if they actually fulfill, will be put in or not, but I'll leave that to you shares. But this is some of those these are the ones we know was missed. So we're gonna back populate the registry up to basically when this comes into effect is my understanding. And then we will add on the next slide, I think we have the note on
The idea is only to populate it with the well-known ones that we know are missing. Nobody's actually going to do the work to scrape all the history and figure out if there's anything else missing, right?
No, I was just wondering about those, if you have ensured this process that's currently in place has been followed for the ones which is being published or in the queue to being published. So I think
that's a question for Stefan. Is EVC going to be, do we need to stick EVC in that list, or will it go in there?
EVC does not mention this reference anymore. This registry anymore. When we had this, there was a very short discussion on the mailing list where you, Bernard, raised the point where the EVC draft should be modified, and I said, there's no point in adding it now for the sake of completeness, just to remove it later or whatever, right? So we assume that Magnus draft will make it through and didn't include this registry. You don't have to worry about EVC in this context. Yeah,
it's just saying what I can update this draft to add this because this your document clearly gets out before. But that's something we can track. I think the important is just to get this process to change the processes that we expect to happen here to and get this published. So and I think therefore the first step here really is to go towards adopting this document, have a quick round saying are we fine with this, and then move on. So and I did some small editorial updates just a few weeks back here to fix some feedback I got, and so.
So I guess the question is, should we have a call for adoption? I think that's a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
Any objections to calling for adoption? Okay, so note taker, please note that that's an action item for the chairs to initiate the call for adoption. And I think that's about all we need to do, right, Magnus?
Yes.
Hey.
Question: have you just working group last call the thing right now? I mean, look, yeah, I'm serious. Just move that thing. It's done, right?
Yeah, I adopt it, and I mean, basically, I think I can try to verify that we have that all the backfilling is correct, and then we can working group last call it, and hopefully we could.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little strange having a working group last call and an individual draft, but I think the working group last call can follow like immediately after the draft IETF version is published.
Like 1 minute later.
Something like that, yes. Before Vancouver, ideally.
Hello, I was waiting in the queue. And this is an
edit.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is like just for my own information. This has been already talked with Ayana, right? We have discussed this with Ayana, what we're doing.
Yes, but it's primarily a question of I mean, this is how we want the process to work. Ayana doesn't make policy; they follow policy, implements policy, but it's up to us to actually decide this. So
that's true, Magnus. But I was thinking of more of a like tooling issues, other things. Like I am pretty sure, like we decide the policy, like how we wanna.
Yeah, but this is nothing strange from the perspectives. No, I mean this is taking notes in the registry. They do that, all these things. It's like, and it's just noting this old registry as closed, adding a few fields, etc. It's nothing strange. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
I talked to Jan about this, so.
I would anyway. I mean, for our, I mean, because we are talking about like adopting these, going for last call, going like I'll just send it for IETF last call and all these things. So, so that in the last minute, Ayana says, oh, this we cannot do, or this is something that we have missed. So I think it's good to just ping them to see like everything here they're agreeing with, and then we get a green light all the way down. And I'll tell the IHG like this is something that we want to do as soon as possible. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay, I think we have our list of action items for the note taker. So thank you, Magnus.
And please make sure that I got the action items right on that one, if you would, please. Thank you.
You have the floor, Pierre.
Oh, all right. Well, very quick update on the JPEG 2000 RTP payload proposal. We have a first receiver implementation in the OpenJPH open source library. So for those that are interested, based on an implementation, there were very minor updates suggested to the specification. So a new draft, a new version of the draft was published. And I'm expecting another implementation soon. And that's the status update.
Are the updates to the draft anything substantive or just
No.
Okay.
There are typos, typos in the bows and the figures, and adding additional, making it clear what symbols were used. So no substantive changes to the algorithm or to the structures.
Excellent. And as far as you're concerned, is this ready to go to last call?
That's the third bullet here. I'd like, so I'd like to give maybe another month or 2 months for that other implementation to come online to make sure that there's not some terrible issue. So that'd be my recommendation, that we reconvene after the summer, and then
okay. So maybe maybe after the meeting in Vancouver.
Yeah, when is that scheduled?
July, what is it? Second week of July, something like that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good target. Okay, thanks. Yeah, let's reconvene after that. Then
okay, sounds good.
I mean, I'd hate to go to last call and discover that we missed something major.
Sure.
So thanks.
Okay, note takers, please add the action items from this. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, this is Łukasz. So we had the last call, but after the last call, we received number of comments over the reflector. So if you go to the next slide, for each of the comment we received, we open a Git issue in our repository. So we don't have this IETF repository, but we keep track in our repository. So here we list the changes we made. So some of them are editorials. Some of them are simplification which were suggested. I think so the first one is just we clarified that the video stream encapsulation is based on the RTP payload format of video codec. That's now should be more clear for the text. As a couple of people mentioned this, that was not clear. There was suggestion that we should reconsider usage of this SRS-TM, MRS-TM, and MRMT. So we aligned the specification based on the comment to the one which is in VVC, RTP payload specification. As well, there was comment regarding how we use the grouping framework and that we cannot have any parameters with the grouping framework, and we corrected that as well. So that was addressed. The next one was related to DON, and as the Atlas data, which is used in the V3C, was aligned with the HVC bitstream, mostly we think that we should keep the DON still in the RTP payload format, so we didn't remove it. And if you go to the next one, so that I think that the 22 was the most crucial comment. So we use the FMTP of video media, which are part of V3C bundle, to indicate the V3C specific parameters. And in the comment we received that it's not possible to use it like this. So we introduced a new attribute, which is the V3C specific attribute, which can be attached as well to video media, as well to the Atlas RTP streams. And the other ones are editorial comments. So, and here on the slides as well, we indicate the issues and our feedback to the issues. And for every issue, we have the diff, so how the draft was changed. So that's the update of the draft.
Okay, so I think probably what we'll want to do is I will review the documenting. I think I had some of the comments. I think somebody, I'm trying to remember who else. Who were the other comments from?
From Christer Holmberg, mostly.
Okay, yeah, we should probably get him to look over the latest one. and then probably we want to, it's a significant enough change, we'll want to do a second working group last call, just to make sure that everybody likes the status of things.
Okay, so yeah.
Well, I'll review. We'll ask Krista to review again, and then do a second working last call action.
Okay, and we should as well move then the documents to the GitHub of IT.
Yes,
okay.
but because we have these issues, we'll want to make sure we do it in a way that preserves the issue's history.
Okay.
So we need to figure out how to do that the best.
Okay, and last meeting I understood that Bernard is our shepherd, right?
Actually, I don't think that's true. Jonathan, are you the shepherd?
Well, I think we decided that. Do we want to? I think we decided that we're going to not have the chairs be the shepherd because that's allowed, and we thought that might be.
Okay, just we would need somebody who would like guide us. It's the first time we do this.
We'll get somebody reasonably experienced. And we had a number of volunteers in Brisbane, so we'll check those notes for who volunteered. Spencer?
And I was just checking what I think you just said, which is you've got some volunteers already. This might be a great opportunity to recruit more.
Yeah, sure. Anybody who would like to volunteer to be a document shepherd, please speak now or email the chairs, or otherwise let us know. Because your document shepherds do not have to be chairs, as we were reminded, and it's a great way, especially if you are, somewhat but not hugely experienced with the IETF. It's a great way to sort of work your way up to experience with the processes. So, like I said, if you're interested, let us know. Otherwise, we will look at people who volunteered previously.
Okay. So. Yeah. For now, we will contact you, Jonathan, if there is any question. And
sure, great.
Yeah, what are the next steps? And
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right. And who's presenting on this one? Mathis.
I am. Hi. Yeah. Next slide, please. So since the last meeting, we had a couple of more issues that we fixed. Next slide, please. All of them that are listed here are editorial issues, and they are closed before the last submission. Yeah, just listed them here so to give an overview of what we did since then. These all came up during our own reviews of the draft. Next slide. We created a couple of pull requests to fix all these issues. I think these are all also editorial. Next slide. There are two pull requests that I would like to talk about today. I'm still seeing the old slide, I think. Yeah, thanks. So most of them are also editorial, except for the one that's bold here, which came up in our own review. I'm going to talk about this a bit more in detail today. And then afterwards, we are going to talk a little bit about implementation status, which is also currently an open pull request in our repository. Next slide, please. So Jörg identified this in our draft, which earlier said that association between flow identifiers and RTP or RTP-CP streams must be negotiated using appropriate signaling. And if a receiver cannot associate flow identifier with any RTP or RTCP stream, it must close the connection with the application error code, unknown flow ID. That is an issue because if we signal out of band, that may take longer than the first RTP or RTCP packet arriving using a certain flow ID. And we certainly don't want to close the whole connection in that case, because signaling might be about to be done. And in that case, we would rather want to wait for signaling before we tear down the whole connection. And that's basically also the solution that we merged in pull request 212. We added some text that has buffers, streams and datagrams can be buffered when the flow identifier that's used in these streams or datagrams is unknown. Then we also say that the amount of buffering of these streams or datagrams should be or must be limited, and a receiver of these, or a buffering receiver of these streams or datagrams with unknown flow identifier can use stop sending to tell the sender using the error code rock unknown flow ID that it doesn't know about this flow ID yet. Bernard.
Yeah, I had a question about why it must be negotiated using signaling. Like in the traditional RTP RFC 3550, it doesn't mix signaling considerations with RTP. And one could consider an API, for example, that didn't require signaling, where the stuff, the incoming flow identifier got surfaced to the app that could decide to handle it or not handle it. So yeah, I don't know why this is, we're starting to require signaling for this. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think we had in mind that this signaling doesn't need to be something like SDP, but could also be either configured statically, or I think my implementation also uses what you just mentioned. It surfaces or it doesn't surface exactly, but it buffers, and then once signaling is done, an application can ask for that specific flow ID. But we could also, of course, add an API that surfaces these unknown flow IDs, and the application can decide what to do with it. But in any case, I think the application will need to know what to do with it at some point, and that may be statically configured or signaled. I think we can change the language here around must be signaled if that's too much or too close to requiring something like SDP. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it sounds like, but it sounds like, it's saying it may be signaled, in which case it may be late, in which case you need to have this language. And I think that it achieves the purpose of the thing you're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, maybe we should say something like streams might be negotiated using signaling and not use any normative language about that at all. Bernard, does that make sense? Or are you still in the queue?
Yeah, it does make sense.
All right, thanks. And then Jörg's in the queue.
Yep. Thinking back to the signaling part, I mean, we are signaling an SDP, how we are using flow IDs as a mechanism to identify which RTP flow goes into what, since we have multiplex port numbers and so on. So if you want to do demultiplexing on the receiver side, you have to signal something. Otherwise you might not, you would need to have implicit information inside a flow to understand which codec, and so forth. But it seems at this point that you need some kind of signaling, or am I completely, and this is why we came up with flow IDs in the first place. And that in turn would require them to be signaled via something. Or am I just missing something here completely?
Well, you need, I mean, you do need to know what codec it is. That is true. But if it's, but that also, basically you need to know the mapping between the payload types and the codecs. But that doesn't necessarily imply that the flow identifier mapping is required, I think. If you know the mapping of the payloads to the codecs, and a new flow ID comes in, you could still, if you decide you want to handle it, you could figure out what it is, right?
But this would default to you knowing that you are using multiplexing of different sessions, different RTP sessions inside the same, the equivalent for RTP on the same transport address.
Yeah, you'd have to know that.
Which means that you would need to have disjoint payload type spaces, which you don't have for traditional RTP sessions as a requirement. Not sure whether we have been identifying this as a requirement and put in strong wording, which is why we have the flow ID multiplexing in the first place. Otherwise, you could argue we don't need that.
Sam?
Yeah, hi. Some thoughts on this. Sort of looking back to how RTP would traditionally do this, in that something can be sending, and then if you haven't quite negotiated what RTP UDP port you're going to be listening on, you just don't have the thing. You don't have the port open, so everything just gets dropped. Certainly, in my own implementation that I've been playing with, that's my current testing method is to just drop flow IDs that I don't know. But what we could do is we could change the wording here to then say that a receiver may close the connection with a rock unknown flow ID and then leave that up to the application to decide, or is that not a particularly favorable wording to put in a spec like this?
One could turn it the other way around and effectively describe the problem like you just framed nicely, because you could say that a flow ID that is unknown may not be processed or does not have to be processed by the receiver. That would mirror what you have in your implementation. It would take care of the race condition, and it would allow you to have handling at the discretion of the receiver side application.
I think I quite like that as an idea. I think there's also for security reasons there has to be a way for a receiver to say no, okay, you're doing something silly, because if you've got an endpoint which is just spuriously creating new flow IDs, that could cause all sorts of horribleness on a receiver that isn't expecting them. So I still think there needs to be a may close the connection if possible. But yeah, if we can also then say you don't have to process stuff for flow IDs you don't recognize, I think that does give options.
So the text for the solution in 2.12 says that receiver can buffer, and then it may use the error code for stop sending. I think we can add a sentence that it may also use it for closing the whole connection. I think that may also be kind of covered in the section on closing connection, which says that I think something like at any point the endpoint may close the connection using any of the error codes registered in this error codes registry, which includes the unknown flow ID error. So we may make this more explicit. I think it's kind of already covered how it is merged after this pull request, but we might want to make it more explicit.
Bernard, are you still in queue or just leaving yourself there? Spencer?
I'm sorry, I was typing. Yeah. So I think what I'm about to say is kind of very similar to what Sam was related to what Sam was saying, which is you've done a certain amount of back and forth in order to get a quick connection open that you could send flow IDs on, right? So I mean, that basically something must have happened, and I think what I'm saying is that's more activity than I sent RDP and UDP to a port that that isn't open yet. I think it's worth saying that we're, if you think back about traditional RTP where stuff is coming in on different ports, then, you're not doing, you didn't have to worry as much about doing violence to other media flows that you did expect and were receiving on. But if we're multiplexing a lot of stuff, a lot of RTP over the same port, then being able to respond based on the connection and not just on a stream or datagrams with a certain flow ID. I think it's a really good plan.
Okay, Magnus.
Yes, trying to type what Spencer says, but
Magnus, I'll finish mine if you want.
Yes, go ahead, take care of finish up. I try to summarize, but anyway, I think you're on the right way here. I mean, a flow ID here represents an RTP session which you yet know doesn't have all the context to process. So I think you're completely right. It should be possible to allow to at least buffer, or at least ignore it, or whatever you feel it's suitable for your implementation until you have this. Give it a bit of time. If it's not coming and it's have to keep going, yes, you need to have some mitigation against deliberate attack or things where things just goes wrong. So I think you're on the right way here. So.
John Lennox. I mean, I guess the only case in which I think the thing Bernard described might make sense is if you were actually doing this like in a more of a bundle model rather than a session multiplexing model, but I think that's not how the way we've decided to go here. So yeah, I think you do need to know the session ID to be able to do the flow ID to know what the session means. That said, like in traditional RTP, I feel like you don't start sending to a port until you know the other side. You don't start sending something until you know the other side knows about it. So I feel like in some sense it's kind of a responsibility of the signaling protocol to make sure this doesn't happen. I'm not sure, for instance, whether, I mean, I haven't looked at the, I'm sorry, I haven't looked at the Spencer's draft for the SDP signaling yet, but like, can a flow ID be added in an answer? If not, this shouldn't ever happen. You basically just have to wait till the answer to get the.
Yeah. Not to deflate your hopes, but don't look at Spencer's draft until at least IETF 120.
Okay, but I guess my point is that I think if you say that a flow ID can't be added in an answer, then there's no problem here. Just wait till I mean, at least from a, wait till you get the answer to start using the flow ID, and then having the rock unknown flow ID error would be fine. If we think that there's cases like where you could add a flow ID, define a flow ID in an answer, then yes, you would need to buffer and have this case. So I think that's sort of the right answer here depends somewhat on what the signaling protocol is doing, which is not clear. Yeah, that's my point is if your ID is in the answer, then you would have the problem. If the flow ID is all defined by the offer, yeah, I need to think about it. Harold?
This eerily resembles early media discussions in using SDP references, and not doing it will be nice because it's a hard problem to tackle. And if you start throwing things away, the first thing you throw away is, of course, the keyframe. So happy if you can avoid it.
All right, do you mean happy if we can avoid doing the buffering, or the whole situation because the signaling protocol should avoid it?
Happy if we can define things in such a way that we always can do something with incoming data, okay, instead of having to buffer it.
Yeah, I see. Thanks. I have a few more considerations about this on the next slide. Of course, not including the thoughts about avoiding the whole situation by using signaling yet. Yeah, but the whole idea of buffering in the first place was modeled after the web transport protocol, which uses a similar mechanism for session setup. It's not exactly the same, but kind of similar. And I looked at that when I wrote this pull request. We are working with real-time media, which means that if we are not buffering, there's the problem that we identified in the first place. We can't deliver media until we finish signaling and know where to put the media. And the user may not see the screen from the beginning if we don't buffer anything. And still, like if we, for example, the situation that Howard just mentioned, where we throw away the keyframe and then have to wait until we get the next one, and then the user will, of course, see that there's a gap in the beginning. Then if we buffer too much, that's kind of the opposite problem. We have a large buffer of RTP packets that we can either play out at once or throw away some part or whatever, but we have to catch up with what is live at that point or real time. And it's we define it in the pull request currently as a implementation decision, how much to buffer exactly. But we say that the implementation must limit it because because of the security implications. So I think we will have some thoughts about this now in the notes that we can take into consideration when we maybe update this again. It's a bit hard to say about signaling in general, I think, or how we can avoid this, but I think we have to think about this a little bit. If there is a way in which we can phrase this in this draft to make sure that this doesn't happen.
And conversely, we need to make sure that we actually can achieve that goal in the signaling, and
yes,
the development of the signaling draft.
Yeah. All right, I think that's all for this topic. Then next slide is about implementations. Bernard asked about implementation status in issue 219, and we wrote a pull request 220, which documents the implementation status following the format of RFC 7942, which gives a template for doing this. We have two dependent implementations, which are ours. One is the one that I presented, I think, 2 or 3 years ago when we first started working on RTP over Quick, and we did some congestion control experiments, which is basically an application that statically configures lots of stuff and implements the encapsulation that we described in RTP over Quick, or in an early version of the draft. And we use this application for lots of tests, and it also supports all kinds of other stuff, which is why we recently published another library that only extracts the relevant parts for encapsulation. So that's why we have two dependent implementations here. And the second implementation really just focuses on the encapsulation of RTP packets in Quick and doesn't do much else. And then we have a third implementation from BBC that Sam shared a while ago. We have included all these 3 implementations in the pull request here, which adds a little short section about each of these implementations. Some fields of these for the BBC implementation are still open because we didn't know how to answer them, but we're planning to reach out, or Sam is here, I think. So yeah, you're in the queue. If you would like to fill out these fields, that would be great. Yes, Sam or Harald first, are you still in the queue, or? Harald? Then maybe Sam.
Yeah, mine will be quick. Yeah, I've literally just come back off holiday, so that's why I picked up on your pull request. So it is on my list of things to do, is to go and fill that out for you. And I'd also like to. I was going to reach out as well because I'd like to do some interrupt testing at some point if you're interested as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for if you fill these out, and then interrupt testing is of course a good idea. We can certainly do that. Yeah, then we will also ask on the mailing list for other people, if other people have implementations, to add their information to that section. And we could, of course, also do more interrupt tests with other implementations. And that's all for implementation status. Next slide, please. Our plan for the next step is to submit draft 11 after this interim and ask for working group last call, and then in parallel try or continue to collect information for implementation section, but we don't think this should block working group last call because the implementation section says it should be removed before publication anyway. We have filled in what we have now. We can add the BBC fields and whatever other implementations we will learn of in the future. And then, of course, we need to continue specifying how to set up work connections to allow testing. I did static configurations for testing in the past. Then we have the SDP draft from Spencer, which I think will be presented next. And maybe there are other possibilities. I don't know, but Spencer is in the queue.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if there are people who have implementations that Magnus and I and Sam don't know about, please contact us also, because it would be helpful to be able to provide that information as well. Thank you.
All right, I think that's all for RTP over quick today. Jonathan?
Yeah, just in terms of working with last call, if you are going to do try an interop, I would be a little more comfortable to have you at least, smoke test the interop before working with last call, because in my experience, once you do an interop, you discover all the ambiguities in your spec. So it wouldn't surprise me if stuff falls out of the interop that you discover you need to clarify in the document. So I would, but I mean, since we have a few open issues anyway, still, that's.
Yeah, so the plan is to merge this last pull request and thereby closing the last issue. Then maybe have to make some updates to what we discussed about the buffering earlier today. I don't know when exactly we will get to real proper interop tests and how long that will take before we can draw any conclusions.
I guess, yeah, that's fair. So I guess just once you've done this last pull request, and maybe you'll have some clear idea of whether that's something you can do soon or not for a while. That should give us. We can decide when to go to working group last call after you've done, when you do the next PR. I don't know how long it's going to take. Hopefully not very long.
Okay, then I suggest we just merge the pull request on implementations, and I talk to Jörg and Spencer what we're going to do, or what else we're going to do about buffering stuff that we talked about. And once we're done with that pull request that comes maybe out of that discussion, once we're done with that, we will contact you chairs and tell what's the status about interop by then.
Sounds
good. We can decide when to start the working group last call.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.
Harold, are you still in the queue, or did you leave yourself?
Forgot to lower the hand, sorry.
It's okay, it happens. All right.
So are you guys ready for me?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, excellent. Talking about STP offer answer for RTP over quick or ROC, and this is just a quick status notification for the working group. It's not presenting brilliant plans that we have carried out already. Next slide, please. So we are noting that the RTP over quick draft is just specifying encapsulation of RTP and RTCP within the quick protocol. It does not cover signaling for session setup. So you see the well cared for child on the shallow end and the SDP child in the deep end, and that's literally true. Next slide, please. So the plan right now is that we are defining SDP for ROC in a separate document from ROC. It's intended to define a minimal usable SDP specification that enables negotiation to set up ROC sessions. And the idea is that conformant SDP messages for ROC can be carried in any signaling protocol that can carry SDP, including SIP, RTC Web, or WIP. Next slide, please. So this is just recognizing that I've been working on. I had started working on the SDP specification more than 2 years ago, and had an individual draft with some other accompanying IDs, but the right answer was that I would join Metis and Jorg to make progress on the RTP over quick specification before we tried to describe SDP for it. We are all 2 years older now and wiser, and we're approaching request for working group last call. So I think it's time to return to SDP for rock. Next slide, please. So I think I certainly have a much clearer picture of what's needed for a usable specification. My plan right now is that I'm starting with text from the draft that I was working on previously, fixing any text that's outdated or overtaken by events. There is a fair amount of that. And picking up questions that we've discussed in previous drafts and at presentations in previous AVTCORE meetings. And I think we have a plan. So Victor has joined me on this mission. Thank you, Victor. And Metis has agreed to review work on this. Thank you, Metis. Other contributors are, of course, invited to come along. Next slide, please. I have a rough draft of what I think the outline for the draft looks like. The biggest thing that I'm looking at right now is things that belong in this draft versus belong somewhere else but still matter. Things the two obvious items that fit in that second category are considerations for use with RTP metal boxes and considerations for end-to-end payload protection. Let's see, Jonathan, do you have a question?
Just a comment based on the previous presentation. I feel like the one thing that, especially as we determined last one, is how flow identifiers are defined and mapped to well, in SDP, that'd be media groups, and in particular how that interacts with offer answer, because so we determined that needs to be figured out.
I think I knew that, except for the part where I didn't write it down. Thank you for saying it out loud, and thank you. Is that Magnus for making sure that that's in the notes? Thank you, which I do look back at. I am interested in comments about the structure of the draft soon, but hope for more helpful comments like that. There are some things that are listed in directions for future work in the ROC draft. That things like multipath and connection migration and things like that being a couple of answers, a couple of examples, so this is not like I think what I'm showing you here is something close to an outline for the document, not an issues list. But I should say that just in general. But so I will not be surprised if I have multiple issues targeting each section of the draft. Next slide, please. So Victor and I are organizing a GitHub repository as a starting point. We have just started creating issues for discussion. We'll be creating PRs proposing text as we reach resolution on issues. I want, and this goes back to previous conversation about the GitHub organization for AVTCORE. I didn't realize that we could request a repository to be added to the AVTCORE organization before it was adopted. What I was really hoping for was just adding this repository wherever it lives to the GitHub weekly activity summary. And I think my goal, and I think Victor's goal as well, is to publish a 0.0 draft that could be a reasonable starting point by IETF 120. Not requesting adoption immediately after 120. Any questions?
Yes. How much is this SDB work focused on only offer answer versus declarative use? I guess you have an interesting case of declarative use for Quick, because the Quick anyway being a client server protocol.
Yeah. So that's so what so one of the things that it's good that I went and worked on Rock for a while, but there are things that we talked about when we were working on Rock that probably got pushed off to something later, and so the question is how much of that turns into something that needs to be addressed in SDP. You mentioned the client server versus peer-to-peer, which I think goes along with NAT migration as well, or sorry, with NAT traversal as well. But one of the questions. So one of the topics that we talked about a lot on RTP over Quick was any discussions that you have with the other Rock peer about congestion control. And there's not really anything in Rock right now that addresses that. And we decided, the working group, I think, decided that was the right thing to do. But the question is, how or if do I tell you that this is media and it's not, and it's real-time media, and it's you should be doing a real-time media friendly congestion control algorithm. And so there are questions like that. That
was maybe not what Ray was asking, but you're right. That's maybe another aspect of this. But I was mostly thinking about from the perspective of how does SDP work. I mean, SDP originally was a purely declarative use. Then we bastardized it into offer answer, which is part of what created a lot of the issues. Because declarative SDP is in some sense more simpler, and it might be that in this Quick, but it's also a question of capabilities and commonality between the endpoints. So I think that's part of it. I was just basically sounding out. It's something for you to think about, saying, can you have an SDP where the server gives you an SDP? You go connect to the server after it's realized, I support all of these codecs, I support the configurations, therefore I can join this RTP session over Quick and actually use it.
Yes, exactly. The other thing I should say is I know people have been thinking about how one would use RTP over Quick without SDP. But we haven't really talked about that very much so far. I'm not quite sure where those so basically to get you out of the SDP, business at all.
But I mean, in some sense, WebRTC isn't truly SDP.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a question of your API for controlling your endpoint. So, but yeah, I will move on now.
Okay. Cool. And Bernard? No, sorry, Sam.
Yeah, so a couple of points on that. Just to quickly toot my own horn for a moment, I wrote a draft about doing SIP over Quick a long time ago. I can drop a link to that somewhere if people are interested.
Thank you.
And one other thing, just to comment that Spencer made, which is how does an endpoint know that it should use that it's doing real-time media? Well, the ALPN will say, I am multiplexing RTP. So you could probably use that as my interpretation would be that you could use that as a signal for this should have a real-time congestion controller put in control of the session.
So I think you're right, and that's what the ROC specification talks about. And one of the things that was out of scope for the ROC draft as a futures thing was multiplexing something that was not RTP along with RTP. So I think that the plan to base things on an ALPN, the ROC ALPN, is a good plan if everything that you're doing over this quick connection is ROC. But I think it gets complicated quickly when the not all of the information that's being transferred over the quick connection is RTP. Maybe that's an okay restriction, but I think that that's something that we need to be really clear on, and that's actually a good. Thank you for poking at that, because one of the things that I've been planning to look at this week after the interim meeting was basically what can we do with multiplexing, and how can we do it, and of course what ALPN you use depends on what level of multiplexing you're doing. And Mattis has done a lot of work early on multiplexing about the time I joined.
I think that if you wanted to do something that isn't RTP alongside that, so certainly when I was doing my SIP stuff, I then had SIP as the ALPN, and then that would then somewhere in there you'd be able to negotiate. I never quite got that far. It's something I would like to get back to at some point. But I think also, although I might be misremembering this, but I think in the Mask Working Group they've been playing with something similar. I did just have a quick Google to try and find if I could find whatever the draft was, but someone else might remember it off by heart. But there was something to do with what if we have different kinds of traffic? Can we just send multiple ALPNs in one session?
Right.
I can't quite find it. If I do find it, I'll let you know.
And thank you for that. My focus is changing a bit on what I can and am paying attention to at the IETF, and I'm expecting to be paying more attention to Mask than in the future than I have been lately. Thank you. So that got me to Bernard.
Yeah, I would note that in Quick, right, there's no negotiation of congestion control because it's a sender side algorithm, right, which automatically interrupts. So I'd question why you need to negotiate congestion control. There may be SDP attributes that you negotiate because you want certain feedback mechanisms and stuff like that. But the congestion control itself, it's not negotiated in Quick, so I don't know why you would negotiate it in SDP.
Right. And me using the word negotiate was not the right word. It was basically that I have just made a quick connection to you. And so how would you know what to expect me to start sending? And if the answer, if the answer is that, for instance, we're using the ROC ALPN, then it's real. You should be doing something that is friendly for real-time media, which is what the ROC spec says. So figuring out what the constraints are for us using ROC now, what the constraints are from that need to go into the SDP draft. I think that's a really important kind. That is the kind of really important issue that I need to be spending time on. And thank you for saying that out loud. Go ahead. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you doing, Spencer?
Doing good. It's good to talk to you when we're not talking about Scone Pro.
That's great. Yeah, so so I have two things to say. One is like with Eddie hat off, what basically Bernard said, like I mean, if you're using Quick as a like a substrate for sending RTP, and you change whatever required to change without changing Quick, then you might actually brought those consideration when you're negotiating SDP, and congestion control is one of that. I think Bernard said it well. Like, okay, there is no congestion control negotiation, so you need to solve it some other way, or go and change how Quick picks up congestion control. There has been like, I think one of the then property of congestion control Quick was like, okay, you can change your congestion control and all these things, right? But later on, the specification doesn't say like what congestion control or how you negotiate congestion control. So
Right.
be careful about like putting those things in the SDP.
Yeah.
So that's basically I wanted to say. Yeah.
And thank you for that. And that is consistent with the guidance that Madison and Jorg and I have been getting about taking stuff about congestion controllers out of the ROC draft for the last 2 years. So good to remember that.
Good. And my Eddie had on things are like, okay, the things that Magnus brought up, like, okay, hey, Quick is about client server thing, and now we have ROC, which is basically could be anything, client server, peer-to-peer, I don't know, like whatnot. So I hope, I mean, that belongs, I mean, it is, we're discussing it here, but that discussion belongs to the ROC craft. And I hope in ROC we're clear about like what are the uses of this ROC protocol. So what is the applicability and what is the scope of that one? Otherwise, we'll be in some kind of confusion.
I agree with that, and I'm glad that I'm working on both of those drafts just to not get lost in between them. I have an impression that the applicability of ROC and the SDP for ROC may not be, that may not be a Venn diagram with just one circle. There may be things that you can do with ROC that you can't do with SDP, and there may be things that you might be able to describe using SDP in order for ROC senders and receivers to know what to do, that they can't know that without they can't know what to do without some form of signaling. But thank you for the reminder to keep the focus on keeping these two drafts consistent in the applicability.
Yeah, and then I forgot about another thing about this STP. I mean, as you just mentioned, and that triggered me this thought. Like, I mean, we need some sort of negotiation, and why it has to be STP. I mean, it could be anything. I mean, how you do transport SDP to your peer. Is this something that we have been considering from beginning, or is it something we have to consider? Like, why do we need SDP to signal the things, that parameters, and all these things, and why SDP offer answer model and all these things? So, was there any discussion on that?
I believe that we discussed this, and Jorg and Metis, please feel free to jump in. But I believe that we discussed this early on, and we, like one of the obvious early use cases was if someone said, I'm doing RTP now, and for some reason I would like to use RTP over Quick, but I don't want to make huge changes to my application. I just want to drop in Rock as the transport and have it work. And of course, most of those will be using our SDP. So I don't know. I think we talked a lot more about use cases where SDP would be helpful than we've talked about use cases where it might not be helpful. So I think that's a really, again, a really good observation. Thank you. Bernard?
Yeah, to kind of follow up on that, as I mentioned, ARPC 3550 or RTP didn't have an SDP dependency. There are implementations of RTP that don't involve SDP in any way.
Right.
I mean, you have to set things up in that you need information to describe where things are going to go up. But that can be done statically, like in your app, you could decide I'm going to statically assign the following payload types, or you just have to put the information in. There's no inherent linkage of RTP to SDP. It is just one convenient way. So, I think we should avoid having, I've seen APIs, for example, that link the two very closely, and that often becomes problematic, but there's no inherent linkage between the two. So it's good and otherwise to stop that from creeping in, under the covers.
Thank you for saying that out loud. This is a reminder that we were doing RTP and announcing using the session announcement protocol long before there was an SDP. And so who knows, maybe it's time for that to come back. But just that there are other ways to provide the information other than you doing it in SDP. Thank you. And that got me to your.
I think as a side note, and as unfortunate as it may be, I think SAP carried SDP, but that's just an aside. I just want to make the point that, so this is well taken, that we are that there is no strict binding. We need to signal stuff, and WebRTC has certainly shown that multiple ways are being able to do this. That we may see future specifications in the context of mock in order to how to signal stuff, and so maybe there is a way to kind of organize the draft that there is a layer that explains, or some part that explains which information has to be exchanged, in some notation, and then having a binding on how that maps to SDP. I think, I'm not sure whether ICE has done something similar, but you probably could also use ICE in non-SDP context, even though it has been, at least the first version was very, very closely tied to it. So that might be an opportunity to actually introduce a new flavor of a structure that has the semantics and then the mapping. There is, but I just wanted to also comment that it would occur weird if the IETF that as an organization that has been using like crazy SDP for the past 20 odd years, in spite of knowing better than doing that, suddenly should come up with a new spec that doesn't support that. So I think it is kind of almost obligatory to take SDP mapping into account. But if that is an opportunity to get us to a better world, then I'm all for it. And so maybe a separate mapping might be a way to take care of that.
I like that observation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Can I respond to your on that?
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, Jonathan. I just jumped into the queue. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But there's what I'd like to have clear understanding of like the separation between ROC as a protocol and SDP for ROC. And I'm happy to see like we're discussing in two different places.
Yeah.
But if ROC requires SDP to be usable, I think that's where I have problem.
Oh, it definitely shouldn't. It definitely shouldn't.
Yeah,
that's why
so,
this is why this entire thing is a separate draft in the first place. Right.
Yeah, I mean that's fine, but the separate draft doesn't mean like it doesn't have like interdependency. So if ROC says somewhere, hey, you can signal anything to establish a ROC session, and I don't care. That's fine with ROC.
Right.
Then we define, okay, with SDP you can actually do that. With HTTP you can do that. I just wrote in the chat like we have a WIM protocol for HTTP signaling for WebRTC and all these things. So we can come up with all these things, and SDP for ROC is one of the way of doing signaling. Then we are fine.
Okay, Azad, I think we're in violent agreement here.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
That makes me settled.
and that puts me back to Jonathan, I think.
Yes, and yeah, so I think there is. Yeah, I think a lot of these protocols use SDP. I mean, I think we should at least have in our minds I don't think we need to say specifically anything about what SIP uses or what WebRTC uses or whatever, but just have in our minds how those work. And in particular, I think somewhat to Magnus's point earlier, we should have in our minds what it would look like to use. I mean, not that I really think anyone wants to do this, but what it would look like to use SDP for ROC for RTSP or SAP, which is the non-offer answer models, and how would that work, and what would it look like if we did that?
Thank you.
And
I think
that
yes. And thank you so much. And I will get off of here and have a great day.
Hello?
Yes, hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. First of all, thanks for all of the reviewer to haptic draft. So finally, the working group call for adoption was complete. And then now you can see the working group draft version in the data trackers. Actually, we fixed one typo related to email address compared to last individual in the personal draft. With respect to the MPEG raisons, so anyone who needs access to the haptic draft, I mean the haptic MPEG document, which is haptic FDIS for the purpose of review, can connect to Stefan privately via his email. Then And now we have one update plan, which is related to the aggregations. And actually, we also upload our document to GitHub, our own GitHub, like other draft, but we are also prepared to upload our draft to the working group GitHub too. Thank you. I think that's all today. So any questions?
My only question: would you want to move as we start moving things into the official working group repo? Would you be interested in moving, or do you want to just stay where you are?
If we need, we can move. Actually, we just made it like just following the other drafts, but anything is good for us.
Okay, well, we'll follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Get things going. All right. Yeah, I think that sounds good. So get that update, and we can have people look it over.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope you can hear me.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, so today I will be providing the recent updates to the viewport and region of interest dependent delivery of visual volumetric media internet draft. Can we go to that? So the new draft version 02 was published on 31st of May this year, and the changes from the previous version was basically we received comments from IANA mailing list that the new additions to the IANA considerations class needs to specify the names that were listed in the IANA website for STP parameters and RTP parameters. So I addressed the comments received from that in the IANA considerations class. So to go through this, basically it has been clarified that the 3D regions attribute, which provides the information about the 3D regions present in an immersive media content, will be added to the attributes named registry in STP parameters, and the new special region and 3D viewport format type values we proposed in this draft will be added to the RTCP payload specific feedback payload type messages in the RTP parameters of the IANA.org. And also on the RTP header extension, the new RTP header extension URIs, which we used for signaling informations of static 3D regions, arbitrary 3D regions, and the dynamic 3D regions will be added to the RTP parameters in IANA website. And I also updated the SDP offer answer example considerations based on the recent updates to the V3C RTP payload format document. And the other thing is basically we declared we filed the IPR declaration on this recently. And can we go to the next page? Yeah. And any suggestions and feedback on this or welcome on the IETF mailing list. And I request the chair for a working group call for adoption on this draft so that it can become the AVTCORE draft from the individual draft status. In fact, actually, for the previous version, we requested and it has been agreed, but I think due to the IPR declaration and all, we haven't proceeded with that. So I would request for a call for adoption. Thank you. Any questions are welcome.
Yeah, I think. I guess make sure. I think probably doing as I said, we had agreed to a working group call for adoption, and then we hadn't gotten around to that, and my apologies for that. So I guess minutes to try to put that on, but yeah, I think doing a call for adoption at this point is appropriate.
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, okay. All right. That brings us to wrap up.
Okay.
Does anybody have any? Go ahead, Bernard.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we got all the action items that we've been talking about in the meeting. I don't know, Spencer, if you can read all the things that we as the chairs are supposed to, and other people are supposed to do and make sure we're not missing anything. I guess we have particularly, calls for adoption, other stuff that we're.
Yeah, I'm actually still typing the last action, but if you want to go through just looking for the string asterisk action asterisk.
Hey, hold on.
Yeah. That should be there, and I will finish typing the action for the last item.
Okay, yeah, continue typing, and let's talk about what's in the notes and make sure we have everything. Okay. All right. So let me look through here. Okay. Action. Chairs to call for adoption and working group, let's call 1 minute after adoption. That's Magnus's draft. And Magnus to ping Ayana for early review. On the subcode stream J2K, wait for additional implementation, check status if ready to progress. On V3C, Krista review changes, then chairs to issue working group last call.
Actually, I think it was both Krista and me to review. So it's an action on me to review also.
Oh, okay. Spencer, can you update that one?
I have just finished. The and actually, if you yeah, what? So
I will go update it here. Looking through the thank you.
Yeah, yes, right. Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm looking through. Then on RTP over quick. Were there no action items? Sam will provide implementation status. Were there no other action items on RTP over quick? I thought we were going to do.
I took as action items to merge the implementation pull request and then do whatever pull request we're going to do based on the discussion on buffering. And then we'll get back to you, chairs, about working group last call and implementation into our tests.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, please put that in there. Okay, and then HTTP offer answer for RTP using quick. Action mostly for the authors to work through the excellent feedback. And I guess that's it, Spencer, for RTP over quick. That's the action.
I will also touch base with you all about whether we want to create this in the AVTCORE organization. But I'll add that action.
Yeah, actually, that's yet another action, I guess, for the various authors and chairs to discuss moving of repos. But we can put that, I guess, up top or something. Okay, and then for haptics, chairs to work with authors to move this draft into the organization. Yep. And then the viewport is follow up with existing adoption call. So I think we've identified all of the actions and next steps at this point.
Just Bernard, on the viewport and ROA dependent, there was no adoption call requested, so I am requesting for that. Yeah. I mean, it has not been done. Yeah. Just wanted to clarify.
Action item to follow up on it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So I think we've got all the action items now, and we just have to make them happen. Okay. Well, any other final words, Jonathan?
No, I don't think so. Did anybody else have any other topics to raise? Any exciting work you're trying to do on us for this time?
Yeah, where IETF 120 is just around the corner. So people who want to present there and should be thinking about asking for time, and I'll send out probably a call for agenda items fairly soon. But yeah, it's only only a little bit more than a month away.
Stefan?
So I have one point here really under other items, and that is there has been recently a pretty noisy last call discussion about the draft written by Murray regarding normative referencing. The tone of that draft originally was the IETF shouldn't download, and please, people who know that and think that I'm mischaracterizing it, please speak up. The tone of that draft was that the IETF shouldn't reference documents from other organizations that are not freely available, with the term freely available defined or arguably redefined in historic context to available without paying anything and without going to anyone, basically by the click of a button, downloadable from the internet. That's what he wanted. There were people who were objecting to this. The current state is that the mechanism that we are using here in this group, specifically that things that are not available for free and downloadable to anyone, like all the MPEG stuff, for example, that's fine, generally speaking, even during the review process. But what I want to say is that there is an initiative that's going on among various people of groups that are interested in defining the term open standard and defining the term free standard in a way that is not the way how it was historically defined. I want people to pay attention to that, and we dodged a bullet there at the moment. Yeah, with the current outcome, we dodged a bullet, but this will come back. And those of us interested in seeing, say, RTP payload formats for MPEG standards as an example, and not the only example, will have to pay close attention to that and interfere and object when the next initiative of that type comes by, because there's always a next initiative on this political stuff. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stefan. If you can post that to the list, that would be appreciated.
I will do that later today, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other items for people to chat about? Or else I think we're done for the day with a little bit of time left. And thank you very much, Spencer, for your note-taking.
Thank you, Magnus. Watching things magically appear was greatness.
2 days in a row. So, Jonathan and Bernard, do you want, if we can turn off the recording, can we have a short chat about the email I sent after we dismiss the rest of people?
I'm not sure it's possible to turn off the recording, but we could.
Yeah, I don't know how to do.
Okay, so okay.
Medico does that automatically, but.
Okay. Okay, then we maybe. So I just want to check that you will take care of this, because I think that item requires a bit of going into it. It seems to have some impact.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Sorry. Which topic, Magnus?
STV. I sent an email to you, I think yesterday. I forwarded an email, basically responded to one which you need to check that and actually, I think, start looking into this, because they have several things which needs registration, or in some case maybe don't even have the rights for the change control they think they have. So you will have to go through it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will. Where did you send me that? Which address did you send that to me?
I sent it to the chat, Elias. So.
Okay.
If you haven't received it, send me a note, and I will.
No, I think I received it, but it might have gone to. This is a mailing list.
Okay.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah. Okay, good. But yeah, please look into that because I think it's gonna need some work from your side. Sorry about it, but yeah, I think you're the right to. It's your responsibility to deal with these things.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Make good choices.
Do our best.